in the opulent salons of New Orleans, where laughter mingled with the clinking of crystal glasses, Eleanor found herself ensnared in a web of societal expectations that both fascinated and repulsed her. As she navigated the intricate dance of polite conversation at the soirées hosted by the city's elite, her thoughts often drifted to the plight of those laboring in the shadows. The discussions that flowed freely around her, about trade, wealth accumulation, and the merits of the plantation economy, were punctuated by the absence of voices that truly mattered. It was during one particularly lavish gathering that she stumbled upon a hidden correspondence, a collection of letters that detailed the ruthless strategies employed to maximize profit at the expense of human dignity. Each word she read ignited a flicker of rebellion within her, compelling her to confront the stark contrast between the grandeur of her surroundings and the suffering endured by countless souls. With each revelation, Eleanor felt the weight of her privilege pressing down, urging her to question not just the morality of her community, but her own complicity in its dark underbelly. Little did she know this awakening would propel her into a tumultuous journey, challenging the norms of her world and igniting a fire for justice that could not be extinguished. Determined to delve deeper into the world that her peers so casually celebrated, Eleanor took to wandering the cobblestone streets of the French Quarter by day, her heart heavy with the weight of her newfound knowledge. The vibrancy of the neighborhood contrasted starkly with the bleak reality hidden behind the gilded facades. Laughter spilled from the open doors of cafes, while musicians played lively tunes, but beneath the lively surface lay the harsh truths of exploitation and suffering. One afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the buildings, Eleanor found herself drawn to a modest shop tucked away at the end of a narrow alley. The sign above the door read, "Antique Curiosities," and the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and forgotten stories. Inside, an elderly shopkeeper greeted her with a knowing smile, as if he recognized the turmoil swirling within her. "What's a fine lady like you seeking in a place like this?" he asked, his voice warm, yet probing. Eleanor hesitated, the weight of her privilege pressing heavily on her chest. "I'm searching for understanding," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, "about our past, about the lives that built our fortunes." The shopkeeper nodded solemnly, gesturing towards a dusty book resting on a nearby shelf. "You might find what you're looking for in this," he said. With careful hands, he pulled it down and laid it open on the counter. The pages were filled with accounts of those whose lives had been sacrificed for the prosperity of others, their voices woven together in a tapestry of resilience and sorrow. As Eleanor scanned the text, her heart raced. Stories of families torn apart, laborers toiling under the weight of injustice, and the relentless pursuit of freedom leapt from the pages. Each tale fueled the fire igniting within her, pushing her toward action. "I need to do something," she murmured, almost to herself. "Understanding is the first step, but it is what you do next that truly matters," the shopkeeper replied, his eyes glinting with wisdom. "The world needs those who are willing to listen and to act." Inspired, Eleanor left the shop with a newfound sense of purpose. She resolved to connect with the very people the letters spoke of, the workers whose lives were entwined with the plantations. That night, as the moon cast silvery shadows across the city, she sought out a local gathering rumored to welcome those who resisted the status quo. The gathering was held in a dimly lit basement, filled with a diverse group of individuals, abolitionists, artists, and free thinkers, all united by a shared vision of a more equitable future. They spoke passionately about their efforts to uplift the marginalized and dismantle the oppressive systems that dominated their lives. Eleanor listened intently, absorbing the fervor and determination of those around her. When the time came for introductions, Eleanor hesitated at the threshold of vulnerability, but as she shared her story, her struggles with privilege, the letters that had shaken her resolve, and her desire to make a change, she was met with encouraging nods and expressions of solidarity. The realization that she was not alone in her quest filled her with hope. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor became entrenched in the cause. She attended meetings, organized discussions, and even started writing pamphlets to raise awareness among her peers. Yet, as she navigated this new world, she faced increasing hostility from those who felt threatened by her growing influence. Whispers filled the salons, and she found herself on the fringes of the very society she once revered. One fateful evening, as she prepared for yet another soirée, a letter arrived, its seal bearing the mark of her family's estate. Her heart sank as she recognized the handwriting of her mother, who had once been her fiercest supporter but now embodied the very expectations Eleanor sought to escape. The contents of the letter were clear. Her family demanded she cease her activities, warning her of the consequences of crossing the line drawn by their social circle. Eleanor's hands trembled as she folded the letter, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. But in that moment of despair, she remembered the stories of resilience she had encountered, the faces of those who had risked everything for justice. With a newfound resolve, Eleanor knew she could no longer remain silent. The time had come to choose. Compliance with the status quo or the pursuit of a just future, no matter the cost. Eleanor stood at the threshold of her home, her heart racing with a mix of defiance and uncertainty. The ornate chandeliers above her glimmered like distant stars, casting shadows that seemed to mock her burgeoning resolve. She recalled her mother's letter, its elegant script a stark contrast to the vitriolic sentiments it contained. Each word echoed in her mind. "You are risking our family's reputation for the whims of a passing fancy." But Eleanor knew this was more than a whim. It was a calling that demanded her attention. Determined to forge ahead, she slipped out into the sultry night, leaving behind the gilded cage of her upbringing. The air was thick with the sounds of the city, laughter and music from a nearby tavern, the distant clanging of horses' hooves against cobblestones, and the fragrant scent of blooming magnolia mingling with the salt of the nearby river. It was a world pulsing with life, a stark contrast to the stifling decorum of her home. As she made her way toward the meeting place of the abolitionists, Eleanor's footsteps quickened. The gathering was held in a modest hall, its walls adorned with banners proclaiming freedom and equality. She stepped inside, the murmurs of conversation blending into a symphony of hope and urgency. The room buzzed with passionate discourse. Men and women of all backgrounds animatedly exchanged ideas on how to dismantle the very foundations of their society's injustices. Eleanor's heart swelled as she took her place among them, her presence a testament to her commitment. She found herself drawn to a woman named Clara, a former slave who spoke with a raw intensity that captivated the room. Clara recounted her harrowing escape from a plantation, her voice steady despite the weight of her memories, igniting a fire within Eleanor. "We are not just fighting for ourselves," Clara implored, "but for those who cannot fight, for every soul shackled by the oppression of their birth." Inspired, Eleanor decided to organize a fundraiser, hoping to raise awareness and support for the local Underground Railroad. She envisioned a grand soiree, one that would draw the elite of New Orleans, but with a twist. Instead of the usual frivolities, the evening would serve as a platform for education, featuring speakers who could share the realities of slavery and the urgent need for reform. It was a bold move, one that could either solidify her standing among her peers or sever her ties completely. As she planned the event, Eleanor faced mounting resistance. Friends she once considered allies eyed her with suspicion, their whispers dripping with disdain. "What will the neighbors think?" they would say, their brows furrowed in disapproval. Even her closest confidant, Margaret, expressed concern. "Eleanor, you're playing with fire. You risk everything for a cause that might lead to your ruin." But Eleanor, emboldened by Clara's words and the stories of those who had suffered, pressed on. She enlisted the help of the abolitionists, each one eager to contribute their talents. Musicians offered their services, artists donated pieces for auction, and speakers prepared to share their experiences. Together, they crafted a vision of unity and resilience, transforming the soiree into a gathering that promised to be more than just a lavish event. On the night of the fundraiser, Eleanor donned a stunning gown, its deep emerald hue symbolizing her commitment to the cause. As guests began to arrive, she felt a mix of exhilaration and trepidation. Would they embrace her vision or scorn her for daring to challenge the status quo? The hall soon filled with laughter and chatter, a swirl of silk and satin. As the clock struck 8, Eleanor stepped onto the makeshift stage, her pulse quickening. With a steady voice, she welcomed the guests and introduced the evening's purpose. She spoke of the realities hidden behind the walls of their grand homes, the lives tethered to the plantation economy that fueled their lavish lifestyle. As she spoke, she saw faces transform, some nodding and understanding, others flinching at the uncomfortable truths laid bare. As the night unfolded, Eleanor witnessed a change. A flicker of curiosity ignited in the eyes of some of her peers. It was a small victory, yet it filled her with hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the seeds of change were taking root. But as the applause faded and the evening came to a close, a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Her mother, arms crossed, eyes blazing with fury. "What have you done, Eleanor?" she hissed, the tension between them palpable. In that moment, Eleanor understood that her struggle was not only against the injustices of the world, but also against the very foundation of her upbringing. She took a deep breath, ready to stand her ground, ready to fight not just for the cause, but for her own right to choose her path. Eleanor stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom, her heart pounding like a drum. The intricately woven silk of her gown brushed against her legs, a constant reminder of the wealth and privilege that surrounded her. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on the ornate walls, illuminating faces that wore the masks of society's elite, each absorbed in their own conversations about fashion, politics, and the latest social gossip. As she scanned the room, her resolve wavered for a moment. The laughter of her friends echoed against the high ceilings, yet it felt like an unfamiliar melody. In stark contrast, the images of suffering she had encountered, The desperate letters from those trapped in the chains of slavery played over and over in her mind, filling her with a sense of urgency that the opulence around her seemed to dull. "Eleanor," Margaret's voice broke through her reverie, drawing her attention. "You're a vision tonight. Are you ready for this?" Her friend's enthusiasm was infectious, yet it clashed with the heaviness Eleanor felt. "Ready as I'll ever be," she replied, forcing a smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I hope they listen." Margaret nodded, a flicker of concern crossing her face. "Just remember, these are your friends. They care about you. They might not understand, but you're not alone in this." Eleanor took a deep breath. "Thank you, Margaret. I needed that." As the evening unfolded, Eleanor noticed a few familiar faces in the crowd, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism as they approached her booth, adorned with pamphlets and donation boxes for the Underground Railroad. She greeted them with a warm smile, but the tension was palpable. "Eleanor, darling," began Lady Pembroke, her mother's closest friend, with an air of condescension. "What is all this? Surely you're not advocating for those people, are you?" Eleanor's heart sank, but she met the older woman's gaze with newfound determination. "I am Lady Pembroke. It is time we address the wrongs in our society. How can we turn a blind eye to the suffering of others?" A pause hung in the air, thick with disbelief. Behind Lady Pembroke, Eleanor caught sight of her mother, standing at the edge of the gathering, her expression a blend of outrage and concern. "Eleanor!" Her mother's voice rang out, sharp and cutting through the laughter around them. "This is not the place for such discussions. You're embarrassing yourself." Eleanor felt the weight of her mother's disapproval, yet her heart burned with defiance. "Mother, isn't it our duty to speak out against injustice, to use our privilege for good?" The room fell silent, and all eyes turned toward her, the tension crackling like electricity. It was a moment suspended in time, one that would either solidify her cause or shatter her spirit entirely. Just then, Clara stepped forward from the back of the crowd, her presence commanding attention. The former slave wore a simple dress, yet it radiated strength. "Excuse me," she interjected, her voice steady yet powerful. "I believe Eleanor is right. The lives of those who are silenced matter. We cannot ignore their pain any longer." Eleanor's heart soared at Clara's support, a reminder that her fight was not just hers alone. She looked around, observing the hesitant faces of her friends and the indignant expression of her mother. This was the moment of truth. "Each of you has a choice," Clara continued, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. "You can choose to remain in your comfortable bubble of ignorance, or you can choose to join us in this fight for freedom. It is not just the right thing to do, it is the only thing to do." Eleanor felt a surge of hope. Perhaps this fundraiser would not just be a gathering of high society, but a turning point, a chance to awaken the conscience of those she had once thought untouchable. She took a step forward, emboldened by Clara's words. "Join us," Eleanor implored, her voice rising above the murmurs. "Let us change the narrative together. No more silence, no more complicity. Let us be the voices for the voiceless." The room held its breath, the air thick with anticipation, as Eleanor stood tall, ready to face whatever came next. In that moment, she knew she was fighting not just for others, but for herself, for the woman she was becoming, unbound by the chains of her upbringing. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere in the grand ballroom shifted. The chandeliers, adorned with crystals that flickered like stars, cast a warm glow over the guests. Yet, beneath the opulence, an undercurrent of unease prevailed. Eleanor stood at the center of it all, her heart racing as she prepared to address the crowd once again. The murmurs of discontent from some of the elite guests were palpable, a reminder of the chasm between her ideals and their expectations. "Thank you all for coming," Eleanor began, her voice steady despite the tremor of anxiety that coursed through her. "Tonight, we gather not just to celebrate our fortune, but to acknowledge those who have been denied the most basic rights. Clara's story is not an isolated incident. It is the reality for countless individuals suffering under a system designed to dehumanize them." Her words hung in the air, met with a mixture of applause and disapproving glances. Lady Pembroke sat with arms crossed, her expression a mask of disdain. "Such boldness is unbecoming for a woman of your standing, Eleanor," she whispered harshly, just loud enough for those nearby to catch her scorn. "You risk everything by associating with such people." Eleanor's resolve only strengthened. She glanced at Clara, who stood off to the side, radiating strength and resilience. The former slave's presence was an anchor, grounding Eleanor in the conviction that her fight was just. "It is time we dismantle the very foundations of our privilege," Eleanor continued, her tone unwavering. "The Underground Railroad is not merely an escape route. It is a lifeline. And I urge each of you to consider how you might contribute." As she spoke, Margaret shifted uncomfortably beside her, a worried frown etched on her face. She had always admired Eleanor's passion, but feared the repercussions of their actions. "Eleanor, please, think about what you're asking of them," she murmured, her voice low enough to avoid drawing attention. "They won't respond to guilt. They'll retaliate. You know how much power they hold." But Eleanor shook her head, eyes aflame with determination. "They may retaliate, but that fear cannot silence the truth. We cannot allow ourselves to be complicit in this horror simply because it is convenient. We must be the change we want to see." The crowd stirred, a mixture of irritation and intrigue rippling through the assembled guests. As Eleanor concluded her speech, she felt a wave of adrenaline wash over her. It was time to take the next step. After the event, as guests began to mingle and retreat into smaller clusters, Eleanor approached Clara. "What do you think? Did I go too far?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, drawing Clara into a hushed conversation. Clara regarded her thoughtfully. "You have not gone far enough, Eleanor. Your words were like kindling. Now you must find a way to ignite a fire. There are those among your guests who will listen, but you must provide them with a path, a way to act." Eleanor's brow furrowed with determination. "I will organize meetings, invite those who showed interest tonight, and create a network. Together, we can raise not just funds, but awareness. We can build a community that will stand against this atrocity." Just then, a shadow loomed over them. It was Eleanor's mother, her expression a mixture of concern and anger. "Eleanor, I must insist that you cease this foolishness at once," she said, her voice sharp. "You are jeopardizing your future, your reputation, and our family's name. This obsession will lead to nothing but disgrace." Eleanor felt a familiar clash of emotions, loyalty to her mother battling with her growing desire for independence. "I cannot go back, Mother. Not when I know what I know. I refuse to stand idle while others suffer." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "You are young and naive. You do not understand the consequences of your actions. This is not just a matter of ideals. It is about survival in our world." "Perhaps it is time for a new world," Eleanor retorted, her voice fierce. Suddenly, she felt a surge of solidarity from Clara, whose presence emboldened her. "I will do this with or without your blessing. I owe it to Clara, to all those who cannot fight for themselves." Eleanor could see the storm brewing in her mother's eyes, but she also caught a glimpse of something else: fear. As the tension thickened between them, Eleanor understood that this was not just a battle for justice. It was a fight for her very identity. With her heart racing, Eleanor turned back to the gathering, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. The weight of her privilege felt heavier than ever, yet she also felt the flickering flame of hope igniting within her. She would not let it be extinguished. Not now, not ever. As the shimmering chandeliers cast their glow upon the intricately embroidered gowns and polished shoes, the air in the ballroom crackled with an unexpected energy. Eleanor stood resolute at her booth, the fabric of her simple dress starkly contrasting with the extravagant attire surrounding her. She had spent countless hours preparing pamphlets, each one detailing the urgent plight of those seeking freedom. With each hesitant glance from the guests, a fire ignited within her, urging her to continue. "You should really reconsider this, Eleanor," whispered Margaret, her voice barely rising above the soft strains of the orchestra. Her wide eyes darted nervously toward Lady Pembroke, who stood with a small circle of admirers, their laughter mingling with the music like a chilling reminder of the divide. "Think about your future. This could ruin your family's reputation." Eleanor turned to her friend, a mixture of frustration and empathy welling up inside her. "And what future do I have if I stand idly by while others suffer? Does my reputation matter more than their lives?" Her voice was firm, though a trace of doubt crept into her heart. Before Margaret could respond, a commotion drew their attention. Clara, who had silently observed from the periphery, stepped forward, her presence commanding yet graceful. With her head held high, she strode toward the gathering of the upper class, her posture radiating strength. The room fell silent as she approached, her eyes locking onto Lady Pembroke. "My lady," Clara began, her voice steady and full of conviction, "you may not have walked the paths of those you deem beneath you, but I have. I have felt the shackles of oppression, and I have been forged in the fires of resilience. It is not a matter of reputation, it is a matter of humanity." A ripple of surprise coursed through the crowd, some faces contorting in disbelief, while others shifted uncomfortably. Lady Pembroke's composure faltered for a brief moment, her lips pressed into a thin line as she processed the audacity of Clara's words. Eleanor felt a surge of pride for Clara, knowing her friend was speaking not just for herself, but for countless others who had been silenced. The tension in the room thickened, and she sensed the weight of the moment hanging in the air like a storm cloud, ready to burst. Drawing courage from Clara's boldness, Eleanor stepped forward, her heart racing. "We cannot turn away from the injustices that plague our society. We must ask ourselves, what kind of legacy do we want to leave behind? A legacy of silence and privilege, or one of compassion and action?" Her voice rang clear, strong enough to cut through the murmurs of disapproval. An unexpected ally emerged from the shadows, a young man named Thomas, known for his family's wealth but also for his secret sympathies toward the abolitionist cause, stepped beside Eleanor. "I stand with you," he declared, his voice steady, "and I urge others to join us, to take a stand against the darkness of oppression. We cannot claim to be civilized while ignoring the suffering of others." The crowd shifted, some faces darkening with disdain while others began to nod, caught in the tide of Eleanor's fervor. A few of the younger guests, emboldened by Thomas's support, began to step forward, their expressions reflecting a mix of indignation and burgeoning courage. But Lady Pembroke was not one to back down easily. "You would align yourself with these people." She spat, her disdain evident. "You risk everything for a lost cause." Eleanor's resolve fortified. "It is not a lost cause, Lady Pembroke. It is one worth fighting for. If we wish to be remembered, let it be for our courage, not our apathy." As the music swelled once more, Eleanor felt an electric pulse of change in the air, a flicker of hope igniting amidst the tension. In that grand ballroom, where the opulence of wealth and privilege met the raw power of conviction, a movement began to stir, a whisper of rebellion that would not be easily silenced. As the echoes of Eleanor's fervent speech lingered in the air, the opulent ballroom felt both stifling and electric. The chandeliers, dripping with crystal, seemed to dim in response to the weight of her words, casting shadows over the haughty faces of the elite. Lady Pembroke's sharp gaze pierced through the crowd, her lips curled into a mocking smile that belied her fury. Eleanor could feel the disapproval radiating from the older matron, a stark reminder of the societal chains binding those who dared to challenge the status quo. "Eleanor, come here this instant." Margaret's urgent whisper broke through her thoughts. Reluctantly, Eleanor stepped away from the gathering throng, her heart pounding with a mix of exhilaration and dread. "You've stirred a hornet's nest," Margaret said, her brow furrowed with concern. "They will not tolerate this." "Let them try," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. "If not now, then when? We cannot afford to remain silent." Just then, a commotion at the entrance of the ballroom diverted their attention. A group of men, clad in the uniforms of local law enforcement, strode in with an air of authority that sent a ripple of anxiety through the crowd. Eleanor's pulse quickened. She recognized one of them, Officer Collins, known for his unwavering loyalty to the elite and his disdain for dissenters. As he surveyed the room, his eyes landed on Eleanor, narrowing in recognition. "What's this?" he called out, his voice booming over the chatter. "An uprising in our midst." "I suggest you keep your voices low, Miss Eleanor. The law has little patience for radicals." Before Eleanor could respond, Thomas stepped forward, his presence a calming force. "Officer Collins, we are merely discussing the future of our society, a society that must not ignore the plight of our fellow man," he said, his tone respectful yet firm. "Is that so?" Collins retorted, a sneer creeping onto his face. "If you wish to discuss bold ideas, perhaps you should do so in private. There are ears everywhere, and I assure you, not all of them are sympathetic." At that moment, Clara emerged from the crowd, her expression fierce. "Let them hear us, officer. We will not be silenced by fear or intimidation. The truth is stronger than your threats." The tension in the room escalated, whispers of support mingling with gasps of shock. Eleanor's heart swelled with gratitude for Clara's bravery, yet she felt the weight of the law pressing against her ideals. "Stand with us, Thomas," Eleanor urged, looking to him for solidarity. "We cannot back down now." With a determined nod, Thomas stepped beside her, the resolve in his eyes reflecting Eleanor's own. "Together, we can change the course of history," he asserted, drawing the attention of those nearby who were still undecided. As murmurs of agreement began to ripple through the crowd, Lady Pembroke's voice cut through the air like a knife. "You're all fools," she spat. "You think your voices can change centuries of tradition. You are simply digging your own graves." Eleanor met her gaze, unflinching. "On the contrary, Lady Pembroke, it is you who are building your own prison, a gilded cage of ignorance. The world is changing, and we will not be left behind." With that, a few members of the audience began to clap hesitantly, their hands coming together in a reluctant show of support. Encouraged, Eleanor seized the moment. "We stand together not just for ourselves, but for those who have suffered in silence. Together, we can be the voice of the voiceless." As the applause grew, Eleanor felt the tide turning, the ballroom transforming from a chamber of privilege into a battleground for justice. The shadows of doubt began to recede, replaced by a flicker of hope that ignited within the hearts of those gathered. But as the clamor of support swelled, Eleanor noticed Officer Collins stepping back, signaling to his men. It was clear that their patience was wearing thin, and that this confrontation was far from over. A plan was needed, and it would take more than words to dismantle the deep-rooted structures of oppression. Eleanor turned to Clara and Thomas, her mind racing. "We need to organize a rally, a public demonstration. It's time for our voices to be heard beyond these walls." Clara nodded, her eyes shining with determination. "Yes, we must mobilize those who believe in our cause. We can't fight this battle alone." As the crowd began to disperse, whispers of Eleanor's call to action spread like wildfire. The seeds of a movement had been sown, and while the road ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, Eleanor felt an unwavering sense of purpose. The ballroom may have belonged to the elite, but the fight for justice was just beginning, and Eleanor was ready to lead the way. As the murmurs of dissent swelled within the lavish ballroom, Eleanor stepped forward, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and fervor. The glint of crystal chandeliers above cast a dazzling light that contrasted sharply with the darkness of their cause. She raised her voice, steadying herself against the weight of Lady Pembroke's disapproving gaze. "Tonight, we stand not just in defiance of this ballroom's decorum, but in the face of a system that perpetuates suffering," Eleanor declared, her words echoing against the marble walls. The crowd, initially taken aback, began to stir, curiosity spilling into murmurs of support. Clara, emboldened by Eleanor's words, stepped beside her. "It's time we acknowledge the voices we have silenced for too long. We cannot allow fear to dictate our actions any longer." Her passion ignited a spark among the gathered guests, some of whom glanced furtively at Officer Collins, who stood at the entrance like a watchful hawk. Thomas, sensing the shift, moved closer to Eleanor. "What if we invite them in?" he suggested, his tone both cautious and determined. "Those who have been oppressed, those who have suffered at the hands of this very elite. Let them speak for themselves." The idea hung in the air, a delicate thread woven into the fabric of their rebellion. But before Eleanor could respond, Lady Pembroke interjected, her voice dripping with disdain. "You would invite the lower classes into our midst." How utterly ridiculous. You risk ruining everything we have built." Her sharp words sliced through the hopeful atmosphere, yet the resolve in Eleanor's heart only deepened. "Is it not our duty to dismantle what we have built on the backs of others?" Eleanor shot back, her voice unwavering. "We cannot call ourselves champions of justice while barricading the very people we wish to help." The tension thickened as Officer Collins stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "This nonsense ends here. You are inciting disorder, and I will not tolerate it. Return to your frivolities and leave the hard work to those who understand how the world truly works." His tone was gruff, but underneath it lay a flicker of uncertainty, as if he were questioning his own authority in the face of their courage. But Clara would not be silenced. "How can you claim to uphold order when your very foundation is built on oppression? True order recognizes the rights of all individuals, not just a privileged few." Her words reverberated through the room, and for a moment the aristocrat stood frozen, grappling with the weight of her challenge. In that moment of hesitation, Eleanor seized the opportunity. "Let us take to the streets. We shall gather those who have been silenced and hold a demonstration at dawn. Let the light of a new day illuminate our cause." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, some faces lighting up with excitement while others remained skeptical. It was Margaret who finally broke the silence. "I will help organize it. We can set up a place for those who wish to speak. If we are to be a voice for the voiceless, we must give them a platform." Eleanor turned to her friend, gratitude flooding her heart. "Together, we can create something unstoppable," she replied, her eyes glistening with determination. As the plan began to take shape, the ballroom transformed into a crucible for change, where the lines of privilege and oppression blurred and a movement was born. With newfound allies and a growing sense of purpose, Eleanor, Clara, and Thomas stood united, ready to challenge the very foundations of their society. As the evening wore on, the opulence of the ballroom faded into the background, overshadowed by the promise of a dawning revolution. And while Officer Collins bristled at the prospect of disorder, the undercurrent of hope surged stronger, reminding them all that the time for action had come. The path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but together they were determined to forge a new world, a world where justice and equality would reign. Eleanor stood at the center of the ballroom, her voice rising above the hushed murmurs of the crowd. "This is our moment," she declared, her eyes ablaze with conviction. "For too long, we have accepted the crumbs thrown from the tables of those who have feasted on our labor, our hopes, and our dreams. No more." Thomas stepped forward, his hand resting on Eleanor's shoulder, offering silent support as he scanned the sea of faces. He could see both fear and determination reflected back at him. Clara, emboldened by Eleanor's fiery speech, began to move through the crowd, rallying those who seemed hesitant. "Remember the stories we've shared, the struggles of our neighbors, the burdens of our families. They cannot silence us," she shouted, her voice unwavering amidst the tension. As Eleanor continued, she glanced toward Officer Collins, whose presence loomed like a shadow over the gathering. He stood rigid, arms crossed, a sneer etched on his face as he weighed his options. The room crackled with energy, each heartbeat echoing the collective pulse of change stirring within. In that moment, Eleanor decided to take a step further. I invite you all to gather in the square at dawn tomorrow. We will march not just for ourselves, but for every voice that has been silenced, every injustice that has been swept under the rug." Whispers of agreement rippled through the crowd. Lady Pembroke, seated with a glass of champagne in hand, rolled her eyes, her disdain palpable. "Such theatrics," she muttered to her companion, but even she could not ignore the mounting fervor around her. The aristocrat's dismissive attitude was met with scornful glares from those who had once idolized her. Suddenly, Collins stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "You think you can just disrupt the peace. You are walking a dangerous path, Miss Eleanor. I suggest you reconsider your words." Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly. "And I suggest you remember that the peace you protect is built on the backs of the oppressed. We are no longer afraid." Her declaration hung heavy in the air, electrifying the atmosphere as the crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement and applause. At that moment, a figure emerged from the back of the room. A young woman with a notebook clutched tightly to her chest. Her name was Lila, a journalist known for her tenacity in peeling back the layers of corruption that plagued the city. She had been observing the exchange from afar, and now she took a step forward, her voice clear and assertive. "Eleanor, let me help. I can document this movement, share our story with the world. The truth needs to be told." The crowd turned their attention to Lila, who felt the weight of their expectations. With a nod, Eleanor welcomed her to the forefront. "Together, we will ensure that our voices resonate far beyond these walls. This is not just about one night or one gathering. This is about igniting a revolution that will echo through generations." With the momentum building, the ballroom, once a symbol of privilege, began to transform into the crucible of a burgeoning movement. The clinking of glasses faded, replaced by the rising chorus of shared purpose. As the night wore on, Thomas, Clara, and Lila strategized in hushed tones, mapping out their approach for the demonstration. They envisioned banners that would wave proudly in the breeze, slogans that would galvanize hearts, and chants that would drown out the oppressive voice of authority. Eleanor, fueled by their collective energy, could almost see the future unfolding before her. A future where justice, equity, and hope would no longer be distant ideals but lived truths. With determination etched on her face, Eleanor raised her glass high, calling for silence once more. "To tomorrow," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "To the dawn of a new era." The crowd echoed her sentiment, their cheers reverberating through the lavish ballroom. Outside, the moon cast a silvery glow, illuminating the path that lay ahead, a path fraught with challenges, yet brimming with the promise of change. Together, they would march into the night, leaving behind the chains of oppression, ready to forge a new world from the ashes of the old. As the final echoes of Eleanor's impassioned speech reverberated through the grand ballroom, the gathered crowd began to murmur, a mixture of intrigue and apprehension swirling among the aristocrats. Clara, keenly attuned to the shifting atmosphere, leaned closer to Eleanor, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Do you think they'll join us?" she whispered, her voice barely rising above the din of clinking glasses and hushed conversations. Eleanor's gaze remained fixed on the distinguished faces around her, searching for signs of empathy amid the skeptical frowns. "We must show them that change is not only necessary, but inevitable," she replied. her voice steady despite the flutter of uncertainty in her stomach. "But first, we need to gather our allies." Outside the ballroom, the cool night air brushed against their faces as they stepped into the courtyard, where flickering lanterns cast a warm glow on the cobblestones. The trio convened on a stone bench, huddled closely together as they plotted their next move. "Lila, you've seen the sparks of dissent across the city," Thomas said, his brow furrowed in thought. "Do you think we could invite those voices to the demonstration? The workers, the families struggling to make ends meet?" "Absolutely," Lila interjected, her notebook ready in hand. "Their stories will resonate far more than ours. I can reach out to them. If we can capture their truth, it will be undeniable." As they spoke, Lady Pembroke's disdainful laughter echoed from the ballroom, cutting through the night like a knife. "They are delusional if they think they can disrupt the natural order," she had said, her voice dripping with scorn. "Order must be maintained. The lower classes should know their place." Clara's fists clenched. "We will show them their place is right beside us, as equals," she asserted, her defiance burning bright. Just then, a figure slipped out of the shadows. A wiry man with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes. It was Jasper, a former factory worker known for his spirited tales of hardship. "I couldn't help but overhear," he said, his voice low but fierce. "You need voices. You've got them right here. We'll stand with you. The workers are ready to rise." The group exchanged glances, a spark of hope igniting among them. Jasper's presence was a catalyst, breathing life into their plans. "We need to make sure the message is clear, though," he continued, glancing toward the ballroom where the elite continued to indulge. "This isn't just about one demonstration. It needs to be a movement, an awakening." Eleanor nodded, her heart racing with the possibilities. "Yes. If we can unite the voices of the workers, the artists, the families, everyone who feels the weight of this oppression, we'll create a chorus that can't be ignored." As dawn approached, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The group began to disperse, each member driven by a shared purpose. Lila hurried off to connect with the workers, while Clara and Thomas strategized on how to spread the word throughout the city. Eleanor, however, remained momentarily rooted in place, her thoughts swirling with both excitement and fear. As she looked out over the city, a deep resolve settled in her chest. Change was on the horizon, and though the path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, she knew that they were ready to forge it together, hand in hand, as they faced down the oppressors who sought to silence them. As the first light of day broke over the horizon, illuminating the streets below, Eleanor whispered a pledge to herself and to the cause they had ignited. Today would mark the beginning of something monumental. Today they would rise. As the final echoes of Eleanor's speech faded into the stillness of the ballroom, the air became thick with anticipation. A flickering chandelier overhead cast a kaleidoscope of light and shadow over the gathered crowd, reflecting the tumultuous emotions swirling within each heart. It was a moment suspended in time, where hope and fear coalesced into a singular conviction. Change was not only necessary, it was inevitable. Outside, the crisp night air whipped against the faces of the newly united group as they stepped onto the cobblestone streets. The moon hung high, a silent witness to their resolve. "Tomorrow at dawn," Eleanor reiterated, her voice steady. "We will stand together at the city square. We will march. We will be heard. Clara, her eyes alight with fervor, nodded emphatically. This is just the beginning. We must reach out to the other neighborhoods. Those who toil in silence must know they are not alone. The urgency of her words sparked a fire in those around her, and they began to strategize, whispering plans of outreach and solidarity. Meanwhile, Lila scribbled furiously in her notepad, capturing every fervent exchange and every flicker of determination. "We need to tell their stories," she insisted, her voice rising over the murmurs. "The world must see the faces behind the struggle. If we can humanize our cause, we will attract more support, more voices." "Then we must start tonight," Thomas interjected, his brow furrowed with thought. "Let's gather testimonies from those willing to share, their struggles, their dreams. Each story is a thread in the tapestry we're weaving." As they dispersed into the shadows of the city, a sense of purpose surged within them. They traversed the dimly lit streets, seeking out the weary faces of workers returning home from the factories, mothers with children in tow, and the elderly who had watched the once vibrant community fade into despair. Each encounter added fuel to their fire, each story a reminder of what was at stake. However, the night was not without its challenges. As Jasper spoke passionately to a group of factory workers, he suddenly noticed Officer Collins lurking in the periphery, his imposing figure casting a long shadow. The tension in the air grew thick as the officer approached, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. "What's this?" A gathering of misfits conspiring in the dark. "It won't end well for you," he warned, each word dripping with derision. Eleanor, sensing the looming confrontation, stepped forward. "We are not misfits. We are voices of the unheard, the oppressed. You can't silence us, Collins. Our strength lies in our unity." A quick glance exchanged between Thomas and Jasper confirmed their shared resolve. They would not back down, not now. The officer scoffed, his eyes narrowing with disdain. "Unity? You think you can change the world with your dreams. This city belongs to those who built it, and you lot are just dust in the wind." But just as Collins turned to leave, a crowd began to form around them, drawn by the palpable energy of the moment. A middle-aged woman, her hands rough and calloused, stepped forward. "You're wrong," she declared, her voice steady despite her trembling frame. "We are not dust, we are the foundation, and we will rise." With these words, the crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement, their collective spirit igniting a sense of hope. Lila grinned, knowing she had the makings of a powerful story, one that would inspire others and shine a light on the injustice they faced. As the night wore on and the group dispersed, they left behind the remnants of their fears and doubts, now replaced by a growing conviction. Tomorrow would bring more than just a march. It would be the dawn of a new era, a call to arms that would echo through the city and beyond. The revolution was not merely a dream. It had become their reality, a pulse that quickened with every heartbeat, every shared whisper of defiance. As the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Eleanor stood at the edge of the courtyard, her heart racing with anticipation. The air was crisp, filled with a palpable energy that buzzed around her like a swarm of bees. She could hear the distant clamor of voices rising, the murmurs of hope and determination echoing among the throngs of the working class who had gathered in solidarity. "Clara, do you see them?" Eleanor called out, her voice barely above a whisper yet filled with urgency. Clara, ever the beacon of enthusiasm, nodded vigorously, her golden hair catching the light as she bounced on the balls of her feet. They've come from every corner of the city. We're not alone in this fight. Lila stepped forward, clutching her worn notebook tightly. We need to document this moment, she insisted, her eyes wide with fervor. Every face, every story must be captured. This is more than a march. It's a testament to our struggle. Just then, Jasper emerged from the crowd, his face flushed with excitement. I spoke with some former colleagues before I left the factory. They're ready to join us. They've felt the weight of oppression for too long, he declared, his voice a steady drumbeat of determination. Eleanor felt a surge of hope. Then let's make this count. We need to march not only for ourselves, but for everyone who has been silenced. Each step we take is a step towards change. The group nodded in agreement, their spirits lifting as they began to chant a powerful anthem of unity, a song that had become a symbol of their cause. However, as they prepared to step into the streets, the shadow of Officer Collins loomed ominously in the distance. He stood, arms crossed, flanked by several of his men, their uniforms stark against the vibrant colors of the dawn. A wave of apprehension swept through the crowd, but Eleanor raised her hand, steadying the group. We will not be cowed by threats. Today, we stand for our rights. Clara, with a fierce glint in her eyes, stepped forward. Let them come. We have the truth on our side. No amount of fear can silence the voices of the people. Just as the tension reached its peak, an unexpected figure emerged from the throng. It was a young boy, no more than 10, holding a tattered flag made from scraps of fabric. With a fierce determination that belied his age, he shouted, "We are not afraid." The crowd fell silent, taken aback by the boy's courage. Eleanor knelt, meeting his gaze. "What's your name, young one?" "Eddie," he replied, his voice steady. "And I want to help. My father lost his job, and my mother's been sick. We need change." Eleanor felt a lump form in her throat. This was the heart of the movement. Voices like Eddie's, raw and unfiltered, crying out for justice. "Then stand with us, Eddie. Every voice matters," she said, smiling through her emotion. As the crowd began to swell, Officer Collins took a step forward. "You'll regret this," he warned, his tone dripping with contempt. But Eleanor met his gaze unwaveringly. "Regret is for those who stand by and do nothing. We will march today, and there is nothing you can do to stop us." With that, the group moved as one, stepping onto the cobblestones with a unified purpose. The sound of their footsteps echoed through the streets, each step a declaration of intent. They marched past the grand ballroom, now eerily silent, as the elite watched from their windows, their faces a mixture of shock and disdain. As they headed deeper into the city, Lila began to capture the moment in words, her pen tracing the stories that unfolded around her. "This is the beginning of something extraordinary," she whispered to Thomas, who had taken it upon himself to direct the flow of the march, ensuring everyone remained together. And so they marched, a tapestry of voices woven together, each story intersecting with another, creating a vibrant narrative of resilience. The dawn heralded not just a new day, but the stirring of a revolution, one that would echo through the halls of power, demanding to be heard. As the first light of dawn stretched across the city, painting the cobblestones in hues of gold and orange, the group stood shoulder to shoulder, Eleanor felt the weight of the moment settle heavily upon her shoulders. This was no longer just about their individual stories, but a collective narrative that would resonate through every street, echoing in the hearts of those who dared to dream of change. Remember, every step we take is for those who cannot march with us, Clara called out, her voice cutting through the chilly morning air. For the mothers who work tirelessly, the fathers who toil under the watchful eyes of Collins, and for young Eddie, who represents not just our future but the hope we fight to preserve. Eddie, clutching a small hand-painted sign that read, "We deserve better," stood firm beside Clara, his tiny frame filled with an undeniable determination. The sight of him ignited a spark within the group, a reminder of why they had gathered in the first place. Thomas stepped forward, rallying the crowd. Today, we gather not just to march, but to speak our truths. We will share our stories, our struggles, and our hopes. Each testimony is a thread that weaves us into a tapestry of resilience. Officer Collins may wish to tear us apart, but together we are unbreakable. As they began to march through the narrow streets, a palpable energy surged through the air. The rhythmic crunch of boots on cobblestones created a symphony of defiance, each step resonating with purpose. Jasper, standing at the forefront, raised his voice above the crowd. "We are not afraid. Let our voices ring out. We demand fair wages, safe working conditions, and the right to be heard." As they approached the town square, the group's numbers swelled. More faces joined the procession, a sea of determination blending into one. Old men with weathered hands, young women with fierce eyes, and children holding on to their parents' fingers, all united by a singular purpose. But in the distance, a dark figure loomed. Officer Collins, flanked by a handful of stern-faced officers, stood ready to confront the tide of change. His eyes narrowed, calculating the threat that loomed before him. "Stop right there," he barked, cutting through the fervor of the crowd. "You are disrupting the peace. Return to your homes or face the consequences." Eleanor stepped forward, her heart racing, but her voice remained steady. "Officer Collins, we are not disrupting the peace. We are demanding it. The peace you speak of is built on the backs of the oppressed. We will not be silenced any longer." The air thickened with tension, and the crowd hushed momentarily, awaiting Collins' reaction. Behind her, Leila pulled out her journal, ready to document what might become a pivotal moment in their struggle. The pen hovered above the page, anticipating the unfolding drama. "Your words mean nothing, Eleanor." Collins sneered, stepping closer, his shadow casting a long, dark line across the cobblestones. "You think your little march can change the status quo. The city is mine to govern, and I will not allow your rebellion to tarnish my authority." His challenge hung in the air, but the moment was electrified by the solidarity of the crowd. With Clara's encouragement, the group raised their signs high, each one a symbol of their resolve. "This is our city too," Jasper shouted, his voice echoing against the buildings. "We will not back down." Eddie, emboldened by the energy around him, pushed forward. "You can't stop us. We just want a chance to be heard." In that instant, the tide shifted. The crowd erupted in chants, voices rising like a wave crashing against a cliff. The sheer power of unity transformed their fear into determination, and for the first time, Officer Collins appeared uncertain, the cracks in his authority becoming painfully visible. As the march continued, the city began to awaken. Windows fluttered open, curious faces peered out, and whispers of solidarity began to ripple through. Eleanor looked back at her friends. They were more than just a group now. They were a movement, an unstoppable force determined to reclaim their narrative. And as the sun fully rose, illuminating their path ahead, they moved forward, together, unyielding, toward a future that promised to be anything but ordinary. As the sunlight spilled over the rooftops, casting golden rays on the cobblestones, Eleanor raised her voice above the growing chorus. "We are more than a moment. We are a movement." Her words resonated through the throng, igniting a spark of determination in every heart present. Clara, holding a bright yellow banner that read, "Together we rise," twirled in place, her laughter infectious, reminding everyone that joy was a vital part of their struggle. Lila moved deftly through the crowd, her camera clicking away as she captured the raw emotions, the clenched fists, the tear-streaked faces, the smiles of newfound allies. She knew that these images would tell a story far beyond the walls of their city. They would echo through time, a testament to their fight for justice. With each frame, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders, but also an exhilaration that propelled her forward, capturing the urgency of the moment. Jasper, having rallied several fellow former factory workers to join the demonstration, stood at the forefront, his broad shoulders squared against the oppressive presence of Officer Collins. "You can't silence us," he shouted, his voice a booming reminder of their shared history. The workers, many clad in old uniforms, raised their fists in agreement, their solidarity palpable. They were a testament to endurance, a living history of grind and grit. Just as the march turned a corner, a loud crash echoed from the nearby alleyway. Gasps rippled through the crowd as a group of young activists, previously unseen, emerged, wielding makeshift drums and banners of vibrant colors. "We heard your call," one shouted, their spirit igniting a renewed energy among the demonstrators. The new arrivals, students, artists, and dreamers, joined hands with the marchers, and a powerful rhythm began to pulse through the streets. Eddie, his eyes wide with wonder at the sight of fresh faces joining their cause, stepped forward. "This is our moment," he cried, his voice ringing with the clarity of youth. "Every generation must fight for what is right. We are here for our future." The drumming intensified, blending seamlessly with the chant, "Justice for all." Justice for all. The crowd surged forward, a wave of humanity marching with purpose. Officer Collins, realizing the tide had turned, stepped in closer, his expression hardening. "You're breaking the law," he barked, but his voice wavered as the sheer energy of the crowd engulfed him. Eleanor locked eyes with him, her confidence unwavering. "We are the law," she declared, her words igniting a roar that drowned out his authority. The officers behind Collins shifted uneasily, unsure whether to advance or retreat. As the march neared the town square, the atmosphere thickened with anticipation. The elite, watching from their grand ballroom, shifted uncomfortably in their lavish attire, their whispers growing louder. The powerful vibrancy of the protesters was a stark contrast to their polished apathy. Lila turned her lens toward the opulent gathering, capturing the dichotomy of wealth and struggle, the privilege of indifference versus the passion of the dispossessed. Suddenly, an enormous banner unfurled from a nearby building, a message scrawled in bright letters, "We stand with the people." The crowd erupted in cheers, their spirits buoyed by this unexpected show of solidarity. Gasps of disbelief rippled through the elite, who had not anticipated such unity among the disenfranchised. The march reached the square, and as Eleanor stepped up to a makeshift podium, a crate adorned with flowers, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. This was the moment to speak not just for herself, but for every voice that had been silenced. Today, we stand together not just for our rights, but for a future where no child must fight alone. Her voice rang out, clear and resolute, echoing against the historic buildings that had long stood as monuments to power and privilege. In that instant, amidst the cacophony of drums and chants, the air shifted. The city, at dawn, had transformed into a vibrant tapestry of hope and resilience, each thread woven together by the dreams of those brave enough to march for change. And as the crowd swelled, their collective heartbeat became a rallying cry, echoing through the streets, a promise that they would not be silenced. As the echoes of Eleanor's impassioned speech hung in the air, a palpable energy surged through the crowd. Clara, clutching her sign tightly, felt the weight of hope buoy her spirit. She could see the faces around her, transformed by the collective will of their gathering. Eyes sparkled with determination, reflecting the courage that had ignited their hearts. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the edge of the square. A group of young artists inspired by the movement began to create a mural on the side of a nearby building. Using vibrant spray paints, they depicted scenes of struggle and triumph, portraying the faces of workers and the essence of their fight. "Art is our weapon," one of the artists shouted, and the crowd cheered in response, the sound reverberating like a drumbeat of solidarity. Thomas, sensing the momentum building, stepped forward and addressed the crowd once more. "This is not just a march, it's a movement. Our voices will not be silenced. Together, we will create a new narrative." His words rang true, igniting a new wave of enthusiasm. Inspired, Eddie jumped up onto the low wall surrounding the square, his youthful exuberance infectious. "Let's make noise. Let's show them we will not back down," he shouted, rallying the crowd to chant in unison, their voices rising in a defiant roar. But Officer Collins, watching with a furrowed brow, began to strategize. He signaled to his fellow officers, their presence a looming shadow over the vibrant scene. "They're getting out of hand," he muttered to his partner, a young officer named Sarah, whose expressions betrayed her discomfort with the escalating tensions. "We need to take control before this spirals." As the chant grew louder, Clara noticed Sarah's hesitation. In a moment of courage, she stepped away from the crowd and approached the officer. "We're not here to cause trouble," she said, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "We're fighting for our lives. Can't you see our pain? Don't you want to help us?" Sarah looked down at the young girl, caught off guard by the intensity in Clara's eyes. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. She considered her badge and what it represented. I want to do what's right," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara nodded, sensing an opportunity. "Then stand with us. Help amplify our voices instead of silencing them." Back in the square, Jasper had taken the microphone from Thomas. "Let's not forget why we're here. This fight is bigger than us. It's for our children, our future." He gestured toward the mural, where children painted with joy amid scenes of struggle. "We owe it to them to create a world where they can thrive without fear. The crowd erupted into applause, and just as the momentum began to swell again, Officer Collins made his move. He strode into the circle, flanked by his colleagues, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. "This gathering is becoming unlawful," he declared, his tone harsh and unyielding. "I will give you one chance to disperse peacefully." A hush fell over the square, the tension crackling like static. But instead of retreating, Eleanor stepped forward, her voice ringing, clear and strong. "We will not be intimidated. We will not disperse until our demands for justice are met. We are not criminals. We are citizens demanding a better tomorrow." In that moment, with hearts pounding and breaths held, the crowd made a choice. They stood firm together, a wave of unity crashing against the wall of authority. Clara exchanged glances with Jasper and Thomas, feeling the collective heartbeat, the unbreakable bond of resilience. This was not just a protest, it was the dawn of a revolution. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, bathing the protesters in a warm golden hue, Clara stood atop a low wall, her voice ringing out like a bell. "This is our moment. Together, we are unbreakable." The crowd responded with an eruption of cheers, their voices melding into a powerful chorus that echoed off the surrounding buildings. Lila, crouched behind her camera, focused intently on Clara, her heart racing at the sight of such unyielding spirit. She pressed the shutter, capturing the raw determination in Clara's eyes. "This isn't just a protest," she thought to herself. "It's a revolution." Each click of her camera felt like a testament to the stories unfolding before her, stories that demanded to be told. In the heart of the square, Jasper rallied the former factory workers, their faces weathered but resolute. "Our labor built this city," he shouted, his voice booming across the crowd. "And it's time our voices are recognized." A wave of agreement surged through the gathered individuals, fists rising in solidarity. The spirit of the working class was palpable, their shared struggles weaving an unbreakable bond. Meanwhile, Eddie darted through the throng, his youthful energy electrifying the air around him. He climbed onto a nearby bench, waving his arms to capture the attention of those around him. "We are the future," he proclaimed, "and we refuse to inherit a broken system." His words ignited a fresh wave of enthusiasm, and the crowd erupted in chants, their rhythm pulsating with a collective heartbeat of hope. But not everyone was as enthusiastic. Officer Collins, stationed near the edge of the square, watched the crowd with a furrowed brow. He felt the tension in the air, a thin line between order and chaos. "Stay calm, stay in control," he muttered under his breath, but doubt gnawed at him. He had always believed in upholding the law, but today he couldn't shake the feeling that the law was on trial. Sarah, standing beside him, felt a similar turmoil. She glanced at the vibrant sea of protesters, her heart resonating with the chants of justice. "They're fighting for something real," she whispered almost to herself. "What if this is the change we need?" Her eyes met Collins's, and for a fleeting moment she saw a flicker of uncertainty mirrored there. Just then, Eleanor stepped forward again, her presence commanding attention. "We demand not just to be heard, but to be seen," she declared, her voice cutting through the din like a knife. The crowd erupted in applause, their hands raised in solidarity. "We will not be silenced. This is our city, our home, and we deserve a future filled with dignity and opportunity." As her words settled among the crowd, a hush fell. Suddenly, a group of young artists emerged, their vibrant, paint-splattered clothes signaling their intentions. They began to paint a mural on the side of a nearby building, each stroke of color infused with the energy of the protest. The mural depicted images of hope, workers united, families thriving, and a future where the elite and the everyday person walked hand in hand. The sight of the mural sparked renewed vigor in the crowd, drawing them closer to witness the transformation of the cold, concrete wall into a canvas of dreams. Lila, inspired by the unfolding artistry, shifted her focus, capturing the interplay between the mural's colors and the emotions of the crowd. She felt a swell of pride. These images would tell the world what they stood for. But as the mural progressed, the atmosphere shifted once more. Officer Collins stepped forward, raising his hand to signal the protesters to disperse. The tension in the air thickened as they fell silent, eyes narrowing on him. "You must clear the streets," he commanded, his tone firm but lacking conviction. Eleanor stepped up once more, her voice unwavering. "We will not disperse until our demands are addressed," she shouted, her passion igniting the crowd once again. Clara joined her, locking eyes with Officer Collins, determination radiating from her every pore. They were at a crossroads, and the outcome hinged on the courage of those gathered. As murmurs of defiance spread through the crowd, Sarah's heart raced. This was more than just a protest. This was a reckoning. She stepped forward, her voice breaking through the chaos. What if we listened? What if we tried to understand each other? A silence fell, leaving everyone suspended between fear and hope. The air crackled with the potential for change, and even Officer Collins hesitated, caught in the weight of their collective demand for justice. The moment hung delicately, a fragile balance between authority and the unyielding spirit of the people. The vibrant colors of the mural began to take shape, the brush strokes weaving a narrative of resilience and hope against the drab backdrop of the city. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the square, Thomas raised his voice above the growing hum of the crowd, igniting a renewed fervor. "This is not just about today," he shouted, his eyes scanning the faces around him. "It's about our future, for our children and their children. We stand here not just for ourselves, but for every voice that has been silenced." Eddie, fueled by the energy of his leader's words, leapt onto a nearby platform, rallying the crowd with infectious enthusiasm. "Let's show them who we are. Let's paint the world with our story." He urged the artists painting the mural to add more vibrant colors, to blend the hues of anger, hope, and resistance into a beautiful tapestry of their struggles. Clara, emboldened by the palpable energy, turned her attention back to Officer Sarah. "You don't have to stand on that side," she called out, eyes wide with determination. "Join us. We can work together." The young girl's voice cut through the tension, a beacon of innocence that momentarily disarmed the young officer. Officer Sarah glanced at her partner, Officer Collins, who remained resolute but visibly shaken by Clara's plea. I just want to protect everyone," she murmured, caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. "But maybe there's a better way," she added, hesitantly, her gaze shifting to the mural, now representing not just the struggles of workers but a universal call for solidarity. Meanwhile, Jasper stepped forward, sharing his own story, his voice resonating deeply within the crowd. "I worked for years in a factory, my hands calloused and my spirit worn. We built this city, but they forgot us, forgot our worth." His words hung heavy in the air, igniting memories of lost dreams and unfulfilled promises. Eleanor, emboldened by Jasper's raw honesty, took the microphone next. "We are the backbone of this society. We will not be erased." She gestured passionately toward the mural, now a kaleidoscope of faces, workers, mothers, fathers, children, all woven together in a tapestry of shared humanity. "Let this be a reminder that we fight not just for wages, but for dignity." As the crowd roared with approval, a sound pierced through the atmosphere, a sharp crack like thunder. A nearby store window shattered, an unintended consequence of a protester's exuberance. The air thickened with tension as Officer Collins raised his hand, calling for calm. "Let's keep this peaceful, please," he implored, his voice strained. But instead of retreating, the crowd surged forward, their chants growing louder. The atmosphere was electric, alive with the spirit of defiance, but the looming threat of violence whispered through the air like a specter. Sarah felt her heart race, torn between her duty and the undeniable pull of empathy. She stepped forward beside Officer Collins, her resolve hardening. "We can talk, we can listen," she shouted, her voice rising above the chaos. "This doesn't have to end in conflict." The crowd paused, a moment of collective breath held in the face of uncertainty. Eddie seized the moment, his youthful exuberance igniting again. "They're right. We have the power to change this. Let's show them." He beckoned the crowd to unite, hands raised high, a sea of solidarity. Through Lila's lens, the moment crystallized, 1,000 emotions captured in a single frame. The mural behind the protesters was no longer just paint on a wall. It was alive, breathing with each heartbeat of the crowd, a testament to their collective spirit. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the square, a shift began to occur. Protesters and officers alike stood on the precipice of understanding, the potential for real dialogue flickering like the last rays of daylight. And in that charged moment, hope blossomed amidst the uncertainty, leaving everyone questioning what they were truly fighting for, and what they might be willing to achieve together. Just as the echoes of the shattering glass lingered in the air, the crowd collectively inhaled, a moment of suspended disbelief. Eleanor seized the opportunity, her voice rising above the murmurs. "This is not a movement fueled by anger, but by our shared dreams." She gestured towards the canvas of their mural, vibrant colors swirling together, each stroke narrating the stories of struggle and resilience. "Let this be a symbol of what we can achieve together." Eddie stepped forward, emboldened by her words. "We are not here to create chaos, but to cultivate change." "Officer Collins, we want to understand your perspective, just as we hope you'll understand ours." His plea for dialogue echoed in the hearts of many, softening the tense atmosphere just a fraction. Officer Collins, wrestling with his own conflicting emotions, looked at his partner Sarah, who stood beside him, her expression a mix of concern and hope. "Maybe they have a point," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the crowd. Collins nodded, the weight of his badge heavy upon him, yet a flicker of curiosity ignited in his eyes. Suddenly, Clara, an outspoken member of the group, emerged, holding a makeshift megaphone fashioned from a cardboard tube. Let's not let this moment pass us by. We can turn this energy into action. She began to chant a new slogan, one that called for unity instead of division. Together we rise, together we shine. The crowd picked up the chant, their voices blending into a powerful surge of determination. The officers, including Collins, found themselves swaying to the rhythm of the protesters' resolve. Sarah took a step closer to the mural, captivated by the imagery of hope it radiated. Each figure depicted was a testament to the stories that had long gone unheard. In a moment of unexpected solidarity, Collins lowered his baton, signaling his willingness to engage. If we're going to talk, then let's talk. But I need to know that we can do this without further escalation. His words were met with cautious optimism. Eleanor nodded earnestly, urging the crowd to quiet down. We're here to find common ground, officer. We want to build bridges, not walls. The crowd's energy shifted, morphing from anger into a palpable sense of anticipation. As the conversation unfolded, Jasper stepped up again, his voice steady. I lost my job last year, and I'm not alone. We're fighting for our livelihoods, for the future we want to build for ourselves and our families. His vulnerability resonated deeply, painting a clearer picture of the stakes involved. The mural, still a vibrant backdrop, took on an even greater significance. Eddie proposed an idea. What if we invite you, Officer Collins, and your team to join us in painting a section of the mural? Let's create something that reflects our shared vision. A ripple of surprise and excitement coursed through the crowd. Collins, taken aback yet intrigued, glanced at Sarah, who smiled encouragingly. The idea lingered in the air, a fragile bridge forming between two worlds. All right, Collins said, a tentative smile breaking through the tension. Let's see what we can create together. The crowd erupted in cheers, their spirits lifted. As the first brush strokes began to merge, the sunset cast a golden hue over the square, illuminating the vibrant colors of the mural and the faces of those who stood united against the backdrop of change. In that moment, under the fading light, hope blossomed amidst the complexities, a testament to the power of dialogue and the endless possibilities of coming together. The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the horizon with hues of orange and purple, as the first strokes of paint hit the mural, bright colors symbolizing hope and resilience. Eddie stepped back, admiring the emerging image of hands reaching out towards one another, a vivid representation of connection and understanding. This is only the beginning, he exclaimed, his voice ringing out over the crowd, igniting a renewed sense of purpose among the protesters. Clara, still emboldened by her earlier conversation with Officer Sarah, seized the moment. What if we add words to the mural? Words that reflect our dreams and our struggles, she proposed, eyes sparkling with excitement. The crowd murmured in agreement, and soon people began to shout out words that represented their feelings. Justice, unity, change. Each word echoing through the square like a battle cry. Meanwhile, Officer Collins stood at the edge of the gathering, brow furrowed as he observed the shifting atmosphere. He turned to Officer Sarah, who was now watching the mural come to life with a contemplative expression. They're not just protesting, they're creating something meaningful, he noted, a hint of admiration creeping into his tone. Sarah nodded slowly, her heart softening as she realized that the protest was not just an act of defiance, but a plea for recognition and understanding. Just then, Jasper, emboldened by the crowd's support, stepped forward once more. "Let me share my story," he called out, voice steady and clear. "I've worked in that factory for 15 years, and every day feels like a battle to make ends meet. Our voices have been silenced for too long." His words were met with waves of encouragement, and the crowd leaned closer, hanging on every syllable. As he spoke, Eleanor stood by him, her presence a pillar of strength. "We are here to demand respect, dignity, and fair treatment," she added, her voice rising above the murmurs. As the mural blossomed with colors and powerful words, Officer Sarah found herself stepping forward. "I want to understand your struggles," she called out, her voice breaking the barrier of authority that had separated her from the crowd. The unexpected declaration sent ripples through the gathering, heads turning in surprise. "Can we talk?" she continued, her eyes locking onto Thomas, who had been watching her intently. A hush fell over the crowd, and Thomas stepped forward, sensing the shift. "Yes, let's talk," he replied, his voice steady, a mix of hope and caution threading through his words. "Let's share our stories and find a way forward together." The crowd erupted in chatter, some expressing skepticism, while others were stirred by the possibility of dialogue. "Let's make a space for that," Eddie shouted, raising his paintbrush high. "Let's create a corner of this mural just for that." He gestured to a blank section, the canvas awaiting the voices of both protesters and officers. Slowly, Colin stepped forward, a reluctant but determined look on his face. "I'll paint too," he said, surprising everyone. He picked up a brush and with a steady hand began to dip it in paint. The moment hung in the air, a fragile thread binding two worlds, one of authority, the other of activism. The crowd watched intently as Officer Sarah joined him, her brush gliding beside his, an emblematic gesture of unity. One stroke at a time, they began to create an image of two figures reaching toward each other, a testament to the belief that understanding could blossom from conflict. As the mural continued to take shape, a sense of excitement tinged the air, the blend of colors representing the myriad of voices united for change. The sun slipped beneath the horizon, but in that square, beneath the glow of street lamps flickering to life, a new dawn began to emerge. A dawn of dialogue, understanding, and perhaps the promise of a brighter future.